We mentioned briefly before the idea of cascading in cascading style sheets. It involves having elements inherit the properties, so the properties cascade from one element to the next. In this section, we'll get into a little more detail about what that means. In particular, we'll be talking about the idea of parent and child elements and specificity. So let's take a look at a diagram. This is a diagram of what's called the document object model, or DOM. You can see here the HTML element is the parent and the body is the child, and so on down the list. But there's also this idea of specificity, and Lee, maybe you can say a little bit about what that means.
Sure. What it means is that a style that's applied to something very general in the DOM, like the HTML tag or the body tag, something that wraps everything else, that has a very general specificity. So then as you start targeting things that are farther and farther down the DOM, which you'll see in a second, how you actually target sub-objects, that has a higher specificity. And so that style will be preferentially applied to that element and will overwrite something that is just applied to the body. You saw this in one of the first sections when we talked about just how CSS looks and showed the font size changing based on a more specific style declaration.
All right, let's take a look at a concrete example using our sample website here. So here's our index.html page. And one thing you might notice here is that we've got these red links, and they're made red by this inline style. And we talked about this in Learn Enough HTML to be dangerous. This is not the preferred way to do things, though. And if you look at this, I mean, this is terrible, right? You've got the same style applied 3 different times. This is a violation of the dry principle, which is don't repeat yourself. And Lee, you call this a programmer's itch, right? You see this, you're like, that can't be right.
Exactly. Every time that you see yourself repeating something over and over, you should suddenly get this programmer's itch to fix it.
Now, if you look carefully, you'll see that it's not just the color red that's repeated. We've also got a repeated border on these divs here. It's giving us this black border. And we've got repeated styles here for the green links inside the divs. So let's eliminate that duplication using an inline style sheet. Is that what it's called? Inline style sheet?
It's called an internal style sheet.
Internal style sheet. There we go. See, this is why we have Lee around, because I don't know this stuff as well as he does. Okay, so let's make an internal style sheet using the style tag. It traditionally goes in the head. I think technically it doesn't have to, right, Lee?
It can go anywhere on the page, but it's just best practice to stick it in the head.
Okay, so let's use the style tag.
And the reason for that
this. Yeah.
is that if you happen to make an error in this section, the head section is not shown to users. Whereas if you have your style just on the page and you make an error for some reason that affects how the page is displayed, all of that is going to get shown to the user.
Oh, really? That's interesting. I didn't realize. I don't think I've put it anywhere but the head, which is, of course, the right practice. Okay, so let's hoist up one of these rules. Let's start with the rule that styles the div border. So that's this one here. And we can actually just copy the stuff inside here. I'm going to copy that. And then what we're going to do here is make a style for divs. So the way CSS works is you give it the name of the tag, and then in curly braces, you can put this rule. And now we have this here, right? We've got an anatomy.
Right. Yeah, let's take a look at the diagram. Let's go to the board.
Go to the board. So yeah, here's the anatomy of this declaration.
So the whole thing is called a declaration, and note that people get a little squirrely with this and call things basically what they want. But first you have a selector, which is in our case div. Then you've got the curly braces. Then you've got your what is actually the declaration. And the declaration consists of a property, which is the way of telling the browser, okay, we're going to be changing this aspect of an element. And then you have the value, which is when you're saying, this is how I want that property to be. And then you end each value each declaration with a semicolon to say, I'm done giving styles now.
Now, technically, I think you don't need the semicolon if there's only
That is correct.
one thing in here, but it's just a good idea to put it in because that way you don't have to remember. It certainly doesn't do any harm. All right, so let's take a look at the result of that. We need to save it first. Now, I'm just going to refresh. You'll see that nothing changes, which isn't surprising at all, given that we actually haven't eliminated the style here. So now we're going to get rid of it. And what we're doing here is a refactoring. This is when you change the form of the code without changing its function. In this case, the appearance should be the same. So I'm just getting rid of these. So that's what the CSS rule does. It's basically a replacement for that inline style. Save it, and now if we refresh it again, it's still the same. By the way, if you want to check this, sometimes you can just like comment it out. So your text editor typically will have a way to do this. So you can see here, at this point, those borders should go away. Oh, we got one that's still there. Ha! Yes. So we actually caught it. You can see it's actually a good idea to to double check it like this. There we go.
Yeah, because of the visual nature of this, CSS is not the kind of programming language where you can write a whole bunch and then just assume that everything's correct. Over time, you're going to get used to the idea of saving your document and refreshing in a browser just to see what happened.
So by the way, you might notice that we've taken some care to format this just the right way, but we don't have to. CSS is like HTML. It's not sensitive to white space. We could do this. Same thing. But this is not good. This is the kind of thing, it becomes really hard to read really quickly.
Yeah, it's fine for one, but if you have a whole bunch of different CSS declarations, that would be impossible to read, as the example in the text shows. It gets real complicated real fast. And another thing to do is when you're adding declarations, to add them alphabetically. It just helps. So if you were to add a font size to this border, it would be helpful to put it after the border instead of before it, because eventually you're going to be going through many, many declarations, and you don't want to have to think about where to find things.
I did not know about that rule before doing this tutorial. That was one of the things that was new to me. I thought, I mean, it's obviously a great idea, but I'm sure if I look over the CSS I've written in the past, it just looks completely crazy to someone like you who actually knows the convention. Like, what is wrong with this guy?
And just to show you, most text editors will make this easy to do. So if
Yeah.
you were to put it out of alphabetical order like this, you can highlight it and then press something like F5, and it will sort it back into alphabetical order for you.
That is pretty cool. All right, so let's get rid of this here. And that's that border we talked about. Now let's take a look at one of the other styles. We've got these links. We've got red links and green links. Let's start with the red links. Now inside of this style, Lee, is the convention to alphabetize these, or is it just
No,
up
the
to your
convention there
personal
is
choice?
more to group things by whether or not they're general or more specific.
Okay.
So when we're talking about something that's going to affect all divs or all links, the way that we currently have things, you want the more general stuff at the top, and then you want the more specific stuff below that.
Okay. So in this case, we're going to style these links. We can just, well, I can type it in. You can see the editor actually just adds the semicolon. It's nice and convenient. So we've got that there, and let's then eliminate these. Text editor actually lets you do multiple of them, but at the same time, but let's just do one at a time, and like that. Refresh it, should not change anything. Again, we're refactoring it. Now, I do like to just double check like this. Yeah, so this is the default blue, and then back to red. All right, well, we've got one left though. Look at this, we've got color green, but we have a problem now, right? Because we just used this this style for the A tag, for the anchor tag. So how do we style color green?
And watch, if we take a look at this and actually try, let's say add
Yeah.
another anchor tag.
Yeah, what's going to happen here? This is a
and
good
make the
good
color
exercise.
green,
Right.
what happens?
Yeah, so let's save that and take a look. See if you can figure out. Oh, they all turn green. And that's part of the cascading nature, right? Because we've, I guess is that's actually technically part of cascading, or does that
It
refer
is.
just to the
So
DOM?
things that come
Okay,
after have higher specificity.
right,
So what happened is we interrupted the cascade and reset it back to the top with green. So
right.
everything becomes green then.
Yeah.
And
So
we don't want that.
the way it goes is just the final rule in the sequence. So here is color red, but then this one comes after, so it overrides it. So we could see this here. Now we're back to where we were. So somehow we have to style just this thing in here. So we can get rid of this here. Get rid of these. So these are even more specific, right? These are overriding the red. But if we do this, and if I've still got this commented out here,
Now everything will be red.
right? Now they're all red because this rule for A is applying to these anchor tags. So we need some way of specifying just the anchor tags here. And now the best way to do this is a technique we'll talk about in the next section, which is to use CSS selectors. But for now, Lee, what's the kind of the quick and dirty way to do this?
We're going to increase our specificity by saying, okay, only make links that are inside of divs green. And we do
Right,
that by adding an additional selector in front of that
like
link.
that.
There we go.
Right, and this works because the other anchors here, the other anchor tags, these red links here, are inside of li tags, right? So they're not, in particular, they're not inside of divs. So now we're saying that anchor tags inside of divs should be green, um, with the global rule where they're red. So that means that the first ones should be red and the second block should be green. Let's take a look. There we
There
go.
we go.